Hi, and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in films, TV shows, and in books. And this video is going to be a relatively brief look at Iron Man 3. Unlike Iron Man 1 and 2, um, there's a fundamental issue with the narrative here that cannot be easily fixed. And that has to do with Aldrich Killian's master plan, the whole motivating factor for the plot. There are two other elements. Tony's character arc and development, as it's developed over Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and now in this film. There are elements here that can be smoothed out and worked around a little bit, but they're the same problems that really cropped up in Iron Man 2. And then the third element, again, ties back into a problem that we had in Iron Man 2, which is the bad guys, seeing the bad guys just as disposable. So let's start with Aldrich Killian's plan. So Aldrich Killian is the senior director, the CEO of Advanced Idea Mechanics, AIM, and he is a brilliant research scientist, a brilliant engineer. So again, we're getting into that territory of, again, it's someone who's mirroring Tony, where Obadiah Stane in the first one had no motivation to have Tony killed off, but he was a mentor to Tony. He was the business mentor. That provided a personal connection and allowed that level of antagonism. In the second film, we had Ivan Vanko, who was, again, brilliant engineer, brilliant scientist, was able to reverse engineer this stuff and build these things. So he, again, is a mirror of Tony. And we also then had Justin Hammer in Iron Man 2, who was like the mirror of Tony, but without the genius, intellect, or ability to make weapons. He was the businessman showman. In this one, Aldrich Killian is basically Tony. He has all of Tony's charm and charisma when we see that scene with Pepper Potts. He is good looking. He looks like the all-American brilliant CEO who's also a brilliant scientist. He's created these amazing inventions because in real time he can show you how his brain is working and project it on a portable mobile miniature 3D hologram that's interactive and you can play around with and move. You know, this guy is brilliant. And it turns out he has a relationship with Tony, or nearly did. We get a flashback sequence that shows that Tony was an absolute dick to him back when Tony was meant to be a dick. And Killian thought about killing himself. That here he was, this geeky, stereotypical with the glasses and the bad teeth and the cane, and he's infirm and the greasy, ugly hair. Because again, we're setting this contrast up because apparently the audience is stupid, that he is like a bargain basement version of Tony. But Killian, after being treated like this by Tony when Tony's meant to be a dick back in the old days, decides, no, I'm going to use this to spur myself on. And he's become a success. He has his own think tank. He has his own research base. He's doing these things. He's building these amazing things. And he's come to Stark Industries to see if they want to buy into his new concept and to help him with this genetic manipulation virus that is going to help cure people and actually give some people superpowers. So you go, well, where's the problem with this? It all seems to be working out really, really well. And you go, well, it's with Killian's plan. The motivating factor for the entire film. So what is Killian's plan? And I want you to imagine, like, this is meant to be a guy who is on the board of directors of a think tank, that all of the people around him are incredibly smart. And so they're sitting around in the boardroom one day and they go, right, we want to do genetic experimentation on humans. But that is currently outlawed in the US. And the first guy goes, well, actually, Aldrich, I have an idea. Why don't we, instead of trying to set up the research and the experimentation in the US, I've had a quick word with legal, I've checked with legal, and apparently US law only extends over the US and US protected territories. So my idea, and I know it's a bit of an outlandish one, is why don't we put the research base in a different country, one that doesn't have that law? And everyone sort of goes, yeah. I mean, that is one idea. That's one way of doing it. How about instead of that, because we would have to, build a whole research base and everything, and we would have to find a country, that would allow us to do this or be corrupt enough that we could just buy off whoever was in charge. That sounds like it would take at least half an hour's work. I have a different idea. And my idea is we go to London and we find an out of work alcoholic actor with substance abuse problems. And we hire him to pretend to be a terrorist leader. Aldrich, sorry, not following your logic here. Why do we need a terrorist leader? Because the way that some of our extremist subjects are spontaneously blowing up and killing people. Yeah, that is one of the issues that we're trying to sort of, iron out. It's a bit of a snag in the process that we have. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that these are terrorist attacks, and we need then a leader, a figurehead, so that people focus on that. Right. Aldrich, I get your general sort of thrust on this one, but by creating a new terrorist network, are we not inviting all of the intelligence agencies in the world and all of the military in the world to suddenly start looking for us? Never mind that, because this is only step one of the plan. There are additional steps, right? Oh, okay. Well, so how are you going to deal with that? Well, what we are then going to do is, once this terrorist network is made up and we have the figurehead in place and release a couple of videos blaming, those little explosions on them, we kidnap War Machine / Iron Patriot. Sorry, Killian, again, hate to interrupt, and this sounds, intriguing. You want us to kidnap, capture a guy in high-tech battle armor, armed with a whole load of weapons and sophisticated, integrated sort of electronic stuff that we haven't been able to replicate. You want us to capture him? Yep. So we're going to capture the Iron Patriot, and then we are going to torture him out of the suit. Again, Killian, I hate to interrupt, but how are we going to torture him out of the suit? Because he's in a self-contained suit. It's a protective body armor thing. I'm glad you asked, Bob, because the thing is, we're just going to heat the outside of it super, super hot. That's going to start melting the suit, and that's going to make it so hot inside that he'll have to leave. Right. Killian, that all sounds absolutely brilliant. Minor point, if we melt the outside of the suit, why do we want the suit? Because what we'll do is we'll repair the damage to the suit, put one of our operatives inside, then we will fly him up so he can meet the president on Air Force One on a trip that he's going somewhere, because he's bound to be flying somewhere in the next, I don't know, month or two. Get on Air Force One, and then we'll kidnap the president. Killian, I know this is all very clear in your mind, but if we're going to damage the suit and then repair the suit so that we can fly in to kidnap the president, we just need something that looks like the suit. It doesn't actually have to have the same functionality as the actual suit. I can get the boys down in engineering to rig up sort of jetpack stuff, and we can have our version of it. We'll paint it. It'll look exactly. No, we need the exact suit because reasons. Reasons. Yep, gotcha. Following along. So we're kidnapping the president of the United States of America. Why is that? Well, and here's the thing: we're going to kidnap the president of the United States of America, and we're going to torture him on live TV, and then execute him. Right, Killian? Like this, this, this isn't really sounding like much of a plan for us to get a research lab where we can do our experiments and build shit. That's because you're being short sighted. Because once we've executed the president of the United States of America and all the law enforcement agencies in the world and all the intelligence agencies in the world and the whole united might of the military of the US is looking for us, that's when we install the vice president of the United States of America to become president. Right. Okay. And how is that going to help us? Because the vice president has a child or a grandchild or some sort of child who we can cure with the Extremis virus. Right. A little bit more, Killian, a little bit more. So when he's in power, he can just make a law saying that it's legal to do this. Right. Killian, I know you specialized in physics and chemistry and a lot of science subjects and engineering, and you spent a lot. By any chance, did you take U.S. civics? Because that's technically not how legislation in the U.S. works. You know, you need the House of Representatives and the Senate sort of to pass the legislation. And I don't think an executive order saying genetic experimentation on humans is fine is quite going to cut it. Nope, it's going to be absolutely fine. The vice president's going to do this, and he's going to do it straight away. And you don't think that if he does it straight away, people are immediately going to think, isn't that a little suspicious? The president's just been assassinated by terrorists, and the very first thing that he does is allow genetic experimentation on humans? Nope, no one is going to see that. And you don't think that when they try and follow up about who assassinated the president, that any of this is going to get connected to us? Nope, not going to happen at all. And you don't think that the alcoholic, substance abuse, dumbass, washed up actor that you hired from some bar room in England is going to blab in any way? Nope, he's entirely 100% trustworthy. Right. Can we go back to Bob's suggestion about just putting the lab in a different country? In fact, we can put it in a country that has this outlawed, but has, like cheaper people to just sort of pay off, because this seems like an awful lot of work. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Killian's plan sucks. There's no way to fix that. There isn't. It makes no sense. We are used to slightly ludicrous plots in superhero movies. So Lex Luthor plans to bomb the San Andreas fault after buying a whole lot of property on the other side of it, so that basically half of California falls into the water and leaves all of this new stuff as the new beachfront property. You go, it's silly, it's ludicrous, it's over the top. But you know what? It was straightforward. It was a way for him to make money. In Die Hard, they go to rob the Nakatomi Tower and they pretend to take hostages and be terrorists because it's buying them time to get into the vault, to get the things that they want. Then by releasing all of the hostages, they can escape with the money and everything in disguise and in the confusion. You go, are there plot holes in both of these things? Yes, but you're willing to meet the story halfway. You can't meet this plan halfway because this plan makes no sense whatsoever on any possible level. It's just stupid. So that's a big issue with the narrative here. And again, it keeps coming back to this. Screenplay writers, novelists, people telling stories often think about it solely from the perspective of their protagonist, from their heroes. And they forget that if you don't give the villain proper motivation, a proper plan that is in any way reasonable from the point in time of where they're constructing it, that it reduces the suspension of disbelief. It can throw your viewer out of the narrative. And they go, but this makes no sense. So that's my problem with Killian's plan. That is easily sidestepped by just put it in a different country. And you go, honestly, like, what's the big deal? So, how do we fix this? And this actually you can fix very, very easily, but it would absolutely change the denouement at the end of the President of the United States being suspended on the tanker, on the ship, and that sort of fight sequence, because there's no reason to involve the President of the United States. There's no reason to do any of that. But you can actually have the majority of the story building up to this, with Killian having a research base in the US and the local senator trying to change the law to outlaw this and bring it down a level. So it's not the president, it's now a senator, which makes it slightly more believable because, yeah, people will investigate, but when the president of the United States is threatened, you have a lot of people investigating. When it's a senator, yeah, you have people investigating, but far fewer than if it was the president. But Killian can have a base, and the extremist people are blowing up, and he's trying to blame it on these terrorists. Tony investigates and finds out that there's actually this research group behind it that Pepper was considering getting involved with, or getting Stark Industries involved with. And you still have that whole thing. And you could even have Pepper being kidnapped and put up there, although that would be cliched. Or Rhodey has been kidnapped and he's up there, and Tony's going in to save Rhodey. There are different ways that you could do it where it is not about the president, which is the thing that just makes it so extreme that it shatters any believability about the story. But yeah, I have a major problem with Killian's plan. I don't think it makes any sense. And if I'd been looking at this, I'd have gone, you have to go back to square one because your villain, the plan, it makes no sense. So let's see what we can see out of this. But let's then think of the Extremis soldiers. Now, one of the issues here is the first two acts of the film spend a lot of time telling us that the Extremis soldiers are suspected of being terrorists. Then Tony uncovers that they're not terrorists. They're military veterans who have been experimented on, and this experiment is unstable and it's causing them to explode, and they didn't want to. And we get a real sense that Tony is now going to right this wrong. He's going to rescue these military veterans who have been experimented on. And you go, that is a great and interesting story. Here is a hero, Tony Stark as Iron Man, and he's going out to rescue people. He's going out to rescue armed forces people. We've made a big statement in this film about the Iron Patriot, about the red, white, and blue. And it's a very patriotic feel to it. And these military vets who have honorably served their country are being experimented on and are blowing up and being called terrorists. And Tony's going to fix this. Brilliant, heroic storyline. Unfortunately, we get to Act 3, where they become nameless, faceless villains who Tony and Rhodey and the AI-controlled murder bots just kill. For no reason. The audience has been given no reason why, after his investigation of finding out that these soldiers, these veterans, had been experimented on and are blowing up against their will, why they are now all suddenly evil henchmen. There's no transition. It just, they go from being victims to being bad guys. And this is a bit worrying, because it's like the visual of that battle, of what the filmmakers had in mind, overrode any sense of what they were trying to do in the first half of the movie, first 2/3 of the movie. Now you can accept that maybe a couple of them were bad guys, or a couple of them, because of the Extremis virus, it had warped them, it had damaged their brains, it had done something to them. But that's not in the narrative. There isn't a single line of dialogue that goes, oh, the Extremis virus has affected them, and they've now all become sociopathic, homicidal maniacs. This is a terrible tragedy. No, it's they're just evil bad guys who can be killed. And what makes it even worse is Tony has been on this journey wanting to save these people, find out who these people are, and to save them. And he and Rhodey just kill all of them, and none of them look down at these bodies and go, these used to be military veterans who had been honorably serving their country, and we've now just killed because this evil guy took over them. It's nah, let's just kill them all. And it feels like such a missing moment from the narrative that they skipped over a step where it established that something went wrong and these are now bad guys instead of being victims. And it's the same problem that we had in Iron Man 2, that someone who should be seen as a victim because the story demanded that they just be a bad guy, the story just went, they're now a bad guy, with no rationale, with no background reason, with no underlying reason, with no subtext or context. They just went from being a victim to being a bad guy because that's what the story needed. So how can we fix this? Well, one of the easiest ways to fix this, because instead of saying that the Extremis virus made them into homicidal maniacs, because clearly some of them aren't, like the guy at the start who didn't want to die, he just wanted his limbs back. We can, instead of them being military vets, and admittedly it is a slightly cliched way of doing it, but have them be a private mercenary military unit. And this actually makes perfect sense within the context of who Killian is. Killian is interested in these illegal experiments. Killian is trying to find money to get a lot of these things funded. And following Avengers, where New York was invaded by aliens, imagine the interest a military contractor would have in some sort of treatment that could turn their soldiers into super soldiers. And there's your narrative. Killian is in bed with this evil, nefarious, or amoral military contractor. They've been doing this. Some of their people have blown up. And so they're trying to cover it up by creating ad hoc this fake terrorist thing because, the public will believe it's terrorists and not us. Tony finds out that these people were actually, they all had military backgrounds. He traces it back. He finds out that it's a military company. He goes to the military and has that going in sequence into like an estate or a building. You have all of that thing where he breaks in. He finds out that Killian actually has a mobile research lab on a ship. And that leads to the final denouement where you have the big battle with the tanker. That's actually where Killian's research lab is. It's a floating ship, and that's how he's been avoiding being caught, is that he's usually out in international waters somewhere doing all of this. It follows the majority of what's going on here, but it means that while we can feel a bit bad for the people who are exploding because of the Extremis virus, we don't feel as bad. And it is a moral fig leaf to put over the fact that later on, Tony and Rhodey and Jarvis controlling all of the suits just kill a bunch of these people because they're evil military contractors, right? It is a little bit two-dimensional, but at the end of the day, it's a superhero movie, and I'm only asking the narrative to meet us halfway. So what's my other issue with this? Well, immediately after that scene, and because Pepper has been infected, we get told in a voiceover that basically within a couple of days, Tony develops a cure. And you have to think to yourself, the first two acts of the movie set up these people as military vets who were victims of an evil scientist. Then Tony's just killed a whole load of them. And then if he'd actually sat and thought about it for a couple of days, he could have cured them. So he's just killed a whole bunch of people who were victims, who were military veterans, who had served their country honorably. because we're never told anything else. They don't have dishonorable discharges. They weren't all from a military prison. They weren't evil people. He just killed all of them, and then, well, oh yeah, I found a cure. Like that. That is just a real sucker punch in this. Why couldn't the cure have been delivered with Jarvis? That he'd been trying to. Tony in one of the suits was trying to hold off all these different soldiers. You could have had a brilliant action sequence of him trying to knock them down and knock them away, knowing that they were going to heal, and waiting for Jarvis to arrive with enough doses of the vaccine or the cure to start tranking all of the different Extremis soldiers. And each time Jarvis actually manages to get to one, it removes their superpowers and they're taken out of the fight. And at the end, then Tony basically has cured and saved all these people. But you still had that brilliant action sequence where he's constantly fighting and trying not to kill them. Because, like, he's in a suit of armor. He can fly way up over their head and just shoot rockets down. But he's not doing that. He's trying to distract them. He's trying to keep them occupied so Jarvis can actually inject them with the cure. You can still have your big action sequence. So there are a couple of obviously issues with that thing. But the other point that gets raised, in my mind at least, is when Tony storms the estate where the actor is who plays the Mandarin. So the actor isn't evil. It's just a job to him, and he's so drunk and so out of it on various drugs that he doesn't really know what's going on. He's just reading lines and he doesn't care. And the guys patrolling outside, they're not in military gear. They're not, clearly wearing a name badge that says "AIM, Evil Mercenary." What they are is a bunch of private security guards. And Tony goes in and he blows some of them up and he shoots some of them. And then one of them suddenly goes, "Oh, I can't deal with this. I surrender. I run away," and he runs away. And it's treated as this comedic moment. So let me ask you this. Are these evil bad guys who Tony can kill with impunity because they are evil and deserve to be dead? If so, if the answer is yes, then why is the guy running away fine? Because he's an evil bad guy. And if the guy running away, it's fine to let him get away because he's not really an evil bad guy. He just was a private security guard who got hired. Why is Tony allowed to kill all of the other ones? Why do we have this? Tony walks in and in cold blood, not in self-defense, in cold blood, builds weapons, plans and orchestrates a plan of attack to murder people. In Iron Man 1, with the exception basically of one bad guy, Tony acts in self-defense. In Iron Man 2, for all of my problems with how Venko is constructed, Tony's fight with Venko is in self-defense. In Iron Man 3, Tony murders people. And you look at this and go, well, how can we fix this? And again, we can go back to that sort of insert of the mercenary company. Have these guys be clearly part of that evil mercenary company? Because if they're evil bad guys, it at least gives that moral fig leaf. Yes, obviously, I would prefer if superheroes actually arrested people or only used lethal force in as a last resort, or were only ever acting in self-defense. Because I want them to be heroes. But if Tony is going to go in without his superpowered armor and without calling in the Avengers and without calling in Shield, and is going to walk into this situation of a bunch of mercenaries and he's way outgunned, then yeah, okay, Tony can use lethal force, but we have to know that they are bad guys. And if they are the evil mercenary company who's part and parcel of this whole evil deal and they're in cahoots with Killian, then it's enough to meet the audience halfway to give them that little justification for it, as opposed to Tony just murdering a bunch of private security guards. Like, do you honestly think that they were in on all of the plans that Killian had? Do you think that they're part of AIM? Do you think they're part of the evil network of scientists genetically experimenting on people? Nah, they're a bunch of guys on probably just about twice minimum wage, wearing a suit, and they think that they're protecting some drunk, washed-up actor who probably made some film back in the 80s that made him rich and now he just lives in this house. You know, and then they have two of these random guys suddenly start torturing Tony. So they are in on it, or they're not, or they are. Which is it? So this brings me to my very last point, which is Tony's arc. In the first one, Tony goes through this whole trial. We have this whole redemptive arc where he's learned the lesson. We have that Pepper giving him the thing saying proof that Tony Stark has a heart. It's the idea that he's meant to be growing up now. He's going to be a real boy, and he's not going to be as narcissistic or selfish or egotistical. He is going to remain arrogant because he's always the smartest guy in the room, but he's learning to care about other people. His relationship with Jensen in the first one. This was a guy he never would have given the time of day to, but suddenly he sees there's a lot more to people when he starts paying attention. It's the beginning of him growing as a human being. In the second one, again, I obviously have problems with Tony's evolution here because it's all undone. Instead of him wanting to protect people, he becomes a sort of vigilante. Instead of him wanting to correct the issues of the past, he just doesn't care. And he creates problems. Like, he goes, Pepper, you just take over the company because I can't be bothered. I'm going to go down here and build these things and you just deal with everything else. He treats everyone badly. In this third one, we get the flashback that shows that Tony was an absolute asshole to Aldrich Killian all those years ago and now has not changed. All that flashback does is show us that Tony is still an asshole. Because I am sure that that flashback was meant to show us that Tony used to be an asshole, but now he's a hero. Except we have that flashback where he treats Killian really badly, goes upstairs to his hotel room to shag the botanist, geneticist, research scientist, then leave a scribbled note about how to fix her problem, and he just swans off. Okay, that's Tony being an asshole. Then, in the modern day, we see that Tony's ignoring Pepper. He's not helping her with any of her problems, and he just buys her things because, that's what women want. He doesn't care. He honestly does not empathize with her. He ignores her. He has his suit talk to her so he can still pretend to be with her and have dinner with her while he's doing the things that he wants to do. Tony is an asshole. Tony's suffering from PTSD because of the Battle of New York. He's suffering this trauma. And we don't really see him deal with that trauma apart from, if I kill a whole bunch of people, I'm going to feel better. All of the character development from Iron Man 1 is completely and utterly undermined. So the way that I would approach fixing this would be, number one, Killian and AIM need to be in bed with some sort of military contractor, or they are a pseudo-military research group. That explains why they have these volunteers who are willing to take this procedure to potentially get superpowers because it's happening after the Battle of New York in Avengers. It ties it into the MCU franchise, and it also is interesting and believable. When the experiment goes wrong and some of them blow up, they try to cover their tracks. But Tony, in the same way that he does basically in the film, starts tracking them down and realizes there is this military connection. He then asks the wrong person about it, perhaps, again, tying it back into the political element that I think could have been worked into all of this, asking the wrong senator about it or calling a contact. They tip off Killian, and that's why they then try and blow up Tony's house. Tony is left then without his suits. You have the whole sequence of him trying to build these things in the little kid's garage, and he tracks down where one of their bases is. He infiltrates the base, killing people because they are an evil military contractor group. And then it turns out that that is, say, a staging post. He finds the information there that, no, the actual research lab where these people are being experimented on is on a ship in international waters. And that's why, he needs the suit and he's summoned Jarvis and blah, 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 flies out there, is trying desperately to get the cure manufactured. And he's using a lab of his to get it manufactured. And Jarvis is going to fly it out. And they shoot all of the Extremis soldiers with this, takes away their superpowers. So Extremis was never going to work as a sort of military thing because Tony immediately came up with a counter to it. You go, it is almost the same film, following almost the same story beats, but you would have to rework so much of the film. So unlike Iron Man 1 and 2, you can't just have a couple of dialogue inserts that fix the narrative. And admittedly, these are just my problems with Iron Man 3. It doesn't address all of the problems with it. And I know a lot of people really enjoyed Iron Man 3. They just wanted the explosions. What I'm trying to say is you can still have all of the actions and explosions. You can still have all of the witty dialogue, but you can actually put a believable story underneath it for people who wanted a bit of a believable story. You don't have to have one or the other. You can have both. And all it requires is a little bit of thought, particularly from the point of view of you have your story. Now look at it from the point of view of your villain. Look at it from the point of view of your bad guys. Do you have your hero just killing bad guys? Is there a reason why your hero is just killing bad guys? Have you made that reason clear to your viewer, to your reader? Is it a proper justification, or is it just because you wanted an action sequence? So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been informative about like some of the approaches that you take in editing when you're looking at a manuscript to make sure that the person is weaving a believable story, is weaving a story that a reader or a viewer is going to be engaged with. And it gives you some insight into like some of the techniques that as editors, we use to do this. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.